Welcome to another episode of Simple Thoughts. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a certain community that I'm personally a part of, and that obviously would be the cartoon community. And I'm mainly just going to be talking about just my general overall thoughts of it, some grievances I've had, and just kind of just my opinions in general as to what I think about it. Certain things regarding the cartoon community I realize is that a lot of the time the cartoon community likes to focus on stuff of the past. That's just kind of my thing that I notice when it comes to a lot of these cartoon channels. They're always focusing more on what happened back in the day, this old cartoon, that old cartoon. We always focus on stuff like Powerpuff Girls, Rocko's Modern Life, or old Nickelodeon, old Cartoon Network. And that's just kind of a thing. I feel like a lot of time we need to stop doing. I feel that needs to stop happening. What's in the past is in the past. It's nice to look back on those things and maybe notice, with an adult mind, and think of the stuff that you might have missed as a kid. Some videos I have seen on that type of stuff, it is nice to see, but at the same time, I feel like we kind of have too much focus on nostalgia. If you know if you already know where I stand on nostalgia, is that it can be a bit of a poison mindset because it's just living in the past with rose-tinted glasses. And that's just kind of my thing. I feel like a lot of cartoon community channels focus a little too heavily on stuff of the past that it gets to a point where it's okay, you're talking about this old stuff that you liked or this old stuff you didn't like. How about we try to, move forward and start talking about some new stuff, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are channels that do talk about new, animations that have come out, and those are always pretty good. Seeing those reviews about these new shows that are out, they're good. But at the same time, what kind of sucks the most is that the new stuff ends up sadly getting put more to the wayside, because a lot of the time we're focusing more on the nostalgic stuff. I feel like the cartoon community in general could be focusing more on new stuff and get out, because there is this sort of dumb detract, these lowest common denominators that just still believe in the idiot mindset that all the shows of the past are the absolute best, and and anything else that comes out today is not as good, or is just bad. And I'm just no, that's not the case. That's why I say nostalgia is a bad thing, can be a bad thing, because you're looking at the past thinking everything was all hunky-dory and great, when it's no, there were a lot of bad things. It was more a minority of good, majority of bad. And that's of every era of anything. There's always a minority good, majority bad. And that happened in the 90s. We had a lot of crap cartoons back in the day. Obviously, that still translates to today, because there are a bunch of good shows. If anything, I feel like there are way more good shows in this era than there have been bad shows. Than there are bad shows. There are still bad shows. Let's not pretend there aren't. But I still can't help but feel we still have this, there's still that dumb mindset that what happened, the old cartoons of yesterday are better than all the good shows of today. And I'm just honestly, I'm of the mindset that, honestly, the shows of today are better than the shows of yesterday. I mean, because a certain thing I notice when it comes to people judging the cartoons of yesterday they always pinpoint to specific episodes, that one rare episode that was just absolutely phenomenal. And maybe they'll point out a few other episodes as well within the series, those old series runs. But they fail to realize a lot of the majority of the episodes in the lineup of those shows were just more or less good, but not the most memorable or not the greatest of the greats. They were good. Of course, they had a few stinkers as well, like every show does. But I still can't help but feel the shows of yesterday, we prop them up too much, to the point where it's we believe they've reached this certain level of godliness that nobody is ever going to be able to touch. And I just feel like that doesn't feel right. You know, there's a whole plethora of good shows out today that are pushing more boundaries and doing a lot more than the shows of yesterday. A lot of them have better animations even. But sadly, I feel like too much of the cartoon community still lives in that mindset that the old is what we need to be talking about the most, because that's the absolute standard. Nothing's ever going to live up to that. When it's like we've had a lot of good shows that probably push past those standards that we put up. Like there's a whole plethora of shows, and that's just something I feel gets annoying when it comes to the cartoon community, is that we have too many shows too many like channels that want to focus on nostalgia. Like, that's a certain thing for me, is that I pride myself on focusing more on new shows. That's why you don't see me really review a lot of old cartoons, because like I said before in like other Simple Thoughts videos, that I feel like if someone else has already done it, they might have gotten to the certain points that I would have gotten to, or said things in a better way than I could have. So it's like, what do I need to review this for? You know? So that's kind of the reason why I'm not really focused heavily on old shows. I might mention them in passing in terms of like similarities between new and old shows, but in terms of like reviewing them every now and then, I might. Like, I've done, like, my deep thoughts on Kids Next Door is like, yeah, I wanted to review an old show. Or my review on Boo Crew was more because nobody else had done a review of Boo Crew. So I was thinking, hey, I could review this. You know, nobody else has done this. No one really seems to remember it like that. So I'm like, here's this review. So that's just something I feel like needs to that's just kind of a problem when it comes to cartoon community, is that we could be focusing more on new and interesting things coming out. There are, like I said, there have been good there are channels that do focus on new and upcoming shows that have come out. They do like good review. They'll do some reviews of those shows or movies and such. And I think that's a lot better to do, rather than just focusing on, hey, remember this old thing that happened back in the past? Remember that old thing and this and that? Because it's like, okay, but can we start moving forward with more new and interesting stuff? Because that's one thing to take note of, is that when it comes to the cartoon community, what you're putting out on display is what everyone's going to be seeing. And keep in mind, we complain a lot about, remakes and rehashes of old properties but at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're remaking, rehashing old properties by talking about these old properties. So guess what? Like, studio execs and stuff like that see like the stuff on the forefront of the cartoon community, and they say, hey, you know what? We should bring this old property back, and start talking about that. And I'm like, well, that's like, we were complaining about remakes and rehashes and stuff, and lo and behold, that's what we're going to keep getting, because we keep talking about these old shows and movies. So I feel like we should be pushing more for the new. Like, that was kind of my thing when it comes to originality when I made that video, in that I feel like we talk about how we want original stuff, but it's like we keep talking about nostalgic stuff. You keep talking about old stuff that, guess what? People are going to think, hey, I guess people want the old. They don't really want the new, so we're just going to give them what they want. Like, the cartoon community just needs to put more emphasis on what's new and what's happening now, rather than what happened in the past. Like, that's just kind of the thing. Like, we could, like, I look at a lot of these channels, like, Pan Pizza, Mr. Enter, and so on and so forth, all other cartoon community channels, and I just think, okay, like, some of these reviews are entertaining, and some of them can be, like, legit, like, tell you about stuff in the past that you might not have even been a part of. Like, you might not even remember this show happened. There have been some good, like, those channels can be good for, telling you or informing you about some stuff that happened in the past. and even giving critiques that can help the future generations in terms of like new artists and stuff, in terms of the do's and do nots. Like, in that front, that could be helpful, but at another point, it still feels like you're still perpetuating the idea of nostalgia because you're focusing so heavily on the past. Like I said, I got no real problems with like those channels and stuff, but at the end of the day, I do feel like we could be putting more emphasis on the new rather than putting emphasis on the old. But at the same time, I feel like that's sort of the problem, in that audiences kind of make it seem like they don't want new. A lot of the time, you'll see on like YouTube, when it comes to the cartoon community, it's always something old is popping up, like a review of an old show you might have watched. Like a new review of an old show ends up popping up in your recent uploads or recommendeds, and it's like, why not a review of this new show that just recently dropped? You know, like that could be helpful. Sometimes that does happen, but most of the time it's always like, because YouTube's algorithm is so kind of funky, so a lot of times you can end up getting a bunch of like videos that just focus on nostalgic properties, and that's just kind of my thing. I feel like that's just something I feel needs to be fixed on that front. So that's just kind of my thing. I feel like when it comes to the cartoon community, we could just be focusing more on what's happening with more recent stuff. There are like people who make there are like channels that do like newscastings of like recent news that comes out of stuff, but at the same time we end up pushing, like when it's recent news of like an old property, like say Invader Zim coming back or Rocko's Modern Life and so on and so forth, we'll also focus on that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's technically new, but at the same time it's still on an old property. I feel like we could put some focus on that, but I feel like we should put a little bit more focus on the new and original ideas that have been coming out as of late. Like honestly, I look at Netflix and a lot of their animated lineup, and it's like there's a lot of really good animated shows. They've just been on a ball. Like they've been on a major roll, like with a bunch of good animated shows lately. Of course, there's some trash and abominations that are still out there, but so far, I still say they've had a really good record. Like this year alone, like there's a whole plethora of animated shows out that like I've reviewed, like you can see on my channel, and a lot of them I end up giving like good reviews. There's only maybe probably roughly 1 or 2 reviews I've done this year that have been negative. I can't really name off the top of my head any like super bad, angering reviews I've had this year. Most of the time, it's all been like just good overall, and like that's just something I feel that's just something we could be doing a bit more. It's just focusing on more of the really good stuff, because that is sort of the thing I pride myself on, is that I'm more of a positive reviewer. I can do negative, of course. Like if I review something and I hate it, then I'll give a review about it. Like y'all already know, like how I felt about Neo Yokio. But as you can see throughout my channel, majority of my reviews have all been mostly positive. Granted, I've even given positive reviews that shows the people that who I've talked with that just kind of don't really enjoy. I kind of noticed, like I've noticed that, and I feel that's something the cartoon community can kind of learn to do. It's like maybe try to be a bit more upbeat. I mean, your opinion is your opinion, but you don't have to be so negative to things that aren't warranted, unless it's Neo Yokio. Like, of course, some of that caliber of bad, by all means be harsh, be cruel, punish the hell out of it. But other shows, I just feel like Disenchantment, it's not that, like, I don't feel like that's a very bad cartoon. It's like some people want to treat it like, it missed the mark, it was just terrible, it does not live up to the legacy of Futurama and Simpsons. I'm like, it's the first season. Like, of course it's not going to live up to the legacy right there on the first try. it still needs like the first season is all about finding your footing, like finding where you're gonna go, like what audiences are liking and so on and so forth. And then the next seasons it's making the proper adjustments. So that's just kind of the thing that I feel. That's just kind of a thing. I feel like we could learn to not be so harsh. Like I see a lot of thumbnails on like these shows that really aren't that bad, and it's like, okay, did you really need to be that harsh to it? Is it really that bad? Like, let's be 100. Is it really that bad of a show, or are you just over exaggerating for the views? You know, are you over exaggerating for clickbait? Like that's why I don't like my thumbnails are just more neutral thumbnails, and you won't know how I truly feel until more or less after until you watch the actual video. Like that's just kind of my thing when it comes to when it comes to cartoon reviews in the cartoon community. Like we could be focusing a little more on some positive stuff. We could be pushing more for the original stuff that is out there. It's like it is out there, but you got to really be more focused on talking about that stuff. Like that's what I feel needs to be that's what I ultimately just think needs to happen within the cartoon communities. Because I do find it kind of annoying. It's like the anime community, they get millions of subscribers. Like you look at a bunch of anime channels, you find a bunch of them, a good chunk of them are in the millions. But when it comes to the cartoon community, you're not going to find like one person who managed to make it to the millions. The most you could find is someone in the 100,000s. And I mean, I guess that's kind of a testament to the fact that like not many people like watch like cartoons like that, or more or less Western animations like that. And I feel a big problem with that is the fact that people are still stuck in nostalgia. They still feel like, no, the old shows are the best and new stuff is just not the same. And then there's always the dumbass, the cow art style, which needs to die. Like that, I mean, that argument needs to die, that is, because it's so stupid and asinine. Because it's not a real thing. There is no cow art style. It doesn't exist. Like, that's just kind of my thing. And that I feel like these shows could be focused. I mean, not these shows. These channels just could be focusing more on new and original stuff. Like, talking about, like, what's really good about this new thing. We could have more channels that talk about the more current stuff. Like, that's the kind of thing I enjoy about Pan Pizza, is that he'll have his top current cartoons volumes, and they're always nice to watch. I like hearing about some new stuff maybe even I missed, you know? Like those are always nice, and I honestly want to see more I want to see more channels like focusing on this stuff. I want to see some channels focusing more on like new pilots that might be coming out. Like that would be interesting to see. That like I feel like more channels could be doing that, like advertising like new channel, like these new up and coming animations, could be advertising new talent coming into the animation industry. Like that could be way more positive. I feel like there's this one guy, LaShawn Thomas. He's got this show about to be on Netflix, I think next year, called Cannon Busters. I'm very excited to see that. I would really want to see that. Like we could use more stuff that's focusing on the new. You know, we could use more people talking about Dragon Prince, talking about Hilda, talking about this, talking about that. Like more channels could be talking about these new and current things that are out there that do need the focus, that very much need that hype, because there are really good shows, and I feel like they shouldn't be forgotten. That's just something that needs to happen within the cartoon community. We could be focusing more on the new and original stuff and leave more of the nostalgia stuff as a passing glance. It's like, yeah, that was fun, it was enjoyable for its time and stuff like that, but now we gotta kind of move forward, you know? We could start moving forward. There's not much left to be like that well has been drained pretty much when it comes to the old stuff. Like we've analyzed it the fucking back. At that point it's like, what can we do with it? What else can be said about it? It's everything that can be said about it has been said. Nothing else. There's not much new to be brought to the table. So I say we could do more analysis and more reviews of just new and original shows that have been coming out, shows and movies that have been coming out as of recently. That's what I feel just needs to happen within the cartoon community. But that's just my simple thoughts on the matter.